right there.
Well, the impression that was given, I can remember, were that they were sort of a group of Texas gun owners or rednecks with their guns. But from what I've heard from all of you in our discussions, is that they were actually an international community. Right? Isn't that right? There were people from the Caribbean, from Israel. Where else?
Lot from the UK.
UK, yeah.
And all over the United States. There were a few Texans. Of course, David Koresh was a Texan. But
Right. Well, just because they showed up with weapons doesn't mean that they necessarily shot first. So how did this interchange of gunfire take place, in which, as I understand it, 4 ATF agents lost their lives? And what was it? 6 Branch Davidians lost their lives. So why was there a gunfight at the OK Corral?
I mean, we've interviewed, I think all of us actually have interviewed the survivors, and their story is very consistent.
What is that story?
And that's the story that David Koresh saw you can see the cattle car trailers coming from a distance, whipping up the dust. And they're driving fast, 60 miles an hour down the driveway. It's a long driveway on a farm road. And he tells everybody, calm down, goes to the front door. It's a double door. And he says, wait, don't shoot. There's women and children here. And then it's confusing because somebody shot the dogs. Right out front, there were some dogs in a pen with a mother with some puppies. I doubt, certainly the Branch Davidians didn't shoot the dogs, but just that gunfire. But I remember Dick DeGuerin telling us, he's the lawyer, we'll talk about him later, who went in there and saw firsthand, very rational judge of evidence as a lawyer, very famous lawyer in Texas.
And Jack Zimmerman was with him.
Was with him. And
former
David showed
Marine lawyer.
them the metal doors, and the bullets are incoming, not outgoing. In fact, he said he didn't see a single outgoing, meaning they're not shooting through.
I have something to contribute here. In 2000, the families and survivors of the Branch Davidians filed a wrongful death suit against the government, right? So the government was on the defense in this case. But I was sitting in the courtroom when an ATF agent was called to the stand, and he told the jury that day that the first shots were from the dog team, whose assignment was they were first ones out of the cattle cars, and they were to shoot the dogs because they were afraid the dogs might bite or be some kind of a danger or threat to the ATF agents. So the first shots fired were by ATF's dog team. Now, did the Branch Davidians think that they were getting fired at? In that confusion, that's certainly a possibility, and that's kind of my theory, has been my theory over the years.
Well, I know that David says in one of the tapes, one of the negotiation tapes that the FBI has released, he says,
this is on the phone he's talking.
Yeah, he's on the phone talking to the FBI. He says, I went to the door, opened the door, and I said, stop, wait, there are women and children in here.
Don't shoot.
Don't shoot. Then he says, about that moment, an 8mm round went off, went by my ear, hit the door, and I slammed the door.
He was shot right then.
And then a little later, in another conversation with a different FBI negotiator, he asked that negotiator, he says, you don't believe that we were defending ourselves. You go look at the videotape that the ATF made the day I opened the door, and you will see who fired first. You'll see the whole thing. And the agent says, well, I don't know anything about a videotape. And David Koresh says, I saw the cameras across the road where you were recording it. Just go look, ask your superiors to let you see the tape. So now, after this was all over with, and the 86 people are dead, there were congressional investigations. And of course, people wanted to view the tape that was recorded that day. And what were we told? We were told that the cameras malfunctioned that day. Yeah, we had cameras, but none of them worked that day.
I remember that.
And then the door would have been good evidence.
And
this is a metal door. After the fire, it would survive.
And it disappeared?
The door is also gone.
Because there were more shots going into the building on the right-hand side of the door, and some shots coming out, more or less on the left-hand side of the door,
right.
as you're looking at the building. And during the fire, and this is on, network video, a combat engineering vehicle, which is just a tank that is disarmed, it went up and grabbed the doors and pulled them off. But the right-hand door is missing. It was never produced during the congressional hearings or the trials, and only the left-hand door was visible. David Koresh also, there, as you mentioned, let's see, a total of 5 people died. There were several, during the shootout, there were several wounded.
Branch Davidians.
Several Branch Davidians. Actually, 4 ATF agents were killed. 5 Branch Davidians were killed during the shootout. David Koresh was wounded in the side. I believe Clive Doyle, a survivor, says that he received the wound to the side when he went up to the top of that central tower. And but then later that afternoon, a young Branch Davidian by the name of Michael Schroeder, he was working at a car repair shop down the road, and his family was there at Mount Carmel. So he started walking back across the fields behind the building, and the ATF agents stationed back there said that he shot at them, but nevertheless, whatever happened back there, Michael Schroeder was shot and killed, and his body was left to lay there for a few days before it was collected or the scene was investigated, and I think it rained in the meantime. So the death of Michael Schroeder was never adequately investigated because with the fire, that was such a tremendous tragedy. I think the death of Michael Schroeder was just shoved aside.
Let me ask you all this, and even people listening to this who might not have witnessed this, but it's on YouTube footage and so forth. What I've always noticed, the day of the raid I noticed this because they kept playing the clip over and over, and it's the scene of the front. Everybody's seen it that's followed Waco.
From the TV reporters.
TV reporters. And there's dozens of ATF agents behind the cars and trucks that are parked in front. There's about 6 or 8 cars parked in front of the building. And they're just firing like this. You see them pulling, just pop, 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 pop. You can hear the gunfire. And the windshields on those cars and trucks that they're crouched behind for cover, not a single one broken. And it's just, I noticed that the very first day. Now, obviously 4 ATF agents were shot, others were wounded. I think most of that happened around the building up on the roof when some of them tried to enter, and there were some fatalities. A couple of them were on camera. But the report we got you and I were in the congressional hearings testifying, was that we received so much return fire from the building that I remember one of them said it was like worse than Vietnam. And I just thought, wait a minute, you're behind the cars, not a single windshield is broken, and you can see the curtains. Every window had curtains. The curtains are closed, nothing's moving behind the curtains. Now there might have been one person on that second floor firing, I can't say for sure. But in general, the way you hear it is there's all these people in the top with their guns firing at the agents, and then the agents firing. And didn't you quoted some source saying we were getting 50 caliber machine gun bullets?
in the
These are
at the hearings, maybe not the day you guys testified. I testified the first day and then stayed for a couple more days. But ATF agent Jim Cavanaugh said in his testimony that they were outgunned, and that it was like the ATF had pop guns and the Branch Davidians had 50 caliber guns and machine guns. I'm not buying that. I never bought that. I don't think they were outgunned at all. But your point is well taken. And another thing we might mention here is that video also shows that the ATF agents are shooting blindly into that building.
Into a frame building with
Into that
women and
building,
children
not knowing
inside.
who's behind those walls. I think that's illegal because you don't know who you're shooting at. And there were infants and children and women in there on the floor trying to protect themselves.
Well, another time too, Jim Cavanaugh, the ATF person that you referred to, he's on the phone with David shortly after the raid of 28. And Steve and David tell him that the helicopters fired. And immediately there's denial on the part of the ATF that the helicopters fired. And David comes to the phone himself. And he absolutely insists that there was fire
He gets very angry
from the
and
helicopters.
starts yelling. Yeah.
And finally, Jim Cavanaugh turns to others in the room. And he comes back and he says, well, what I'm saying is there was no automatic fire from the helicopters. And David said, whether it was automatic or not, you fired through our ceiling.